mute button unmuting itself. My name is Jesse. I am with Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. And if you are joining us for the first time, we are all about bringing conservation, adventure, and science into classrooms around the world through over 40 live, free, monthly interactive broadcasts. A huge thank you to all our teachers and students for joining us today as we continue to celebrate and showcase the coolest people, places, organizations all across planet Earth. It is such a pleasure to get to do this and bring these stories to you every single day. Now, over the last few months, we've sort of dove back in with a topic that we really like to feature in September, and that is plastic pollution. This is something that so many kids around the world are so passionate about. You guys do such great work to try and change your habits to help save the world around you. And today we are going to dive in with Maureen McCarthy for her very first broadcast with us here at Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants. She's going to talk about some of her innovative work in activism, trying to encourage people to do the same and take positive action for the planet. We're going to talk about waste. We're going to talk about what to recycle together and so much more. And so, without further ado, I'm going to welcome in Maureen. Maureen, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the broadcast. I can't wait for your presentation today.
Thank you. Yep. Awesome.
Awesome. So I know you've got a lot to share with us. If you want to bring up your slide deck and go full screen with that guy, you are good to go.
And am I in full screen right now?
You are. It's thinking about it. If you press play on that guy, it'll be good.
Awesome. All right.
Perfect. Nice.
How's that?
You're all set.
Good. Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity to talk to you about this topic that I'm super passionate about. So my name is Maureen, and my team and I created a nonprofit called FoCo Trash Mob. FoCo stands for Fort Collins, and that's where the team lives. But you can do a trash mob wherever you live, and I hope you will. So what is a trash mob? Well, have you ever seen a flash mob? If not, you should Google it and watch one. They're choreographed events that are meant to look spontaneous. Well, a trash mob would be a flash mob, but with an environmental message and action attached to it. So the people would be waving or dragging the same plastic item or juggling it or wearing it. I don't know. That's up to how creative you want to get with it. Then afterwards, everyone would mail that plastic back to the manufacturer with a well-written letter that includes real viable alternatives for them to use. Our dream is to make a trash mob video, and we just got fiscally sponsored. So maybe that will happen this year. Until then, we do direct action campaigns that annoy and nudge plastic corporations. We enjoy educating the public about the plastic pollution crisis, kind of like what I'm doing with you today. We want to try to have fun while doing something about all the unnecessary plastic. And our motto is reduce, reuse, return to offender. This may all sound like a weird way to protest single-use plastics, or SUPs, but I call them SUPs. But others have had a similar idea. B. Johnson coined the term active discards in her book, Zero Waste Home. And some angry ladies in England conduct plastic attacks by returning their SUPs to the store. So why is protesting SUPs so important to me? Well, I worked for over 12 years at my county's landfill and then for my city's waste reduction and recycling team. Part of my job was to train my volunteers at our recycling center to answer all of those nuanced questions that you will probably ask me today. Like, should I take the cap off or keep it on when I recycle my water bottle? Where can I recycle styrofoam? What do you mean this isn't recyclable? It says so right here. Like you all may have noticed from these questions, and I certainly did, most of the confusion about recycling was around plastics, most of which is not recyclable. And while the questions mounted, so did the plastic. It seemed like we kept seeing more and more in different kinds of SUPs coming to our center. And this graph shows that's exactly what was happening. So, challenged with educating my community about this, I focused on how we must understand that not all recycling is created equal. We need to look at recyclables as the resources that created our packaging. For example, paper. We know that paper comes from trees and it's a great thing to recycle. It makes total sense to make paper from paper and leave the trees to make oxygen. But paper can only be recycled about 7 times before the fibers get too weak. Unlike aluminum, which is something we should always recycle, it is recyclable infinity times without changing its chemical properties. And when you drink from an aluminum can, at least 50% of it is made from other aluminum cans. And when bauxite is mined to create the aluminum, it is hugely degrading to the area where it's extracted. But plastic is different. During my 12 years at the landfill and recycling center, hardly anyone I asked knew where plastic came from. How many of you knew this? Especially the last part that is more recent, that most plastics today are made from ethane, a byproduct of fracked gas. And most people thought that the numbers in the chasing arrows meant that those plastics were recyclable. The reality is that most plastics are not recyclable, and the plastic industry knew that for decades. They appropriated the chasing arrow symbol for their resin identification system. This was an ingenious marketing move because it suggests that any item with this symbol can be recycled. But the truth is that the numbers inside the triangle symbol are a resin identification code. It just tells the manufacturers what chemicals and other properties are contained in those 7 types of plastic. By the way, not only are there more than 7 kinds of plastic, there are more than 700. So let's take a deeper dive into plastic production so we can understand how it's made. Remember that most plastic today is made from ethane, which used to just be flared off during the fracking process. Nowadays, that ethane is captured and sent via pipelines to an ethane cracker facility. Cracking is the term chemists use for the process of breaking molecular bonds in complex hydrocarbons to create simpler ones. Bear with me. Because the bond is very strong, the process requires extremely high temperatures. Ethane cracks at 1,650 degrees Fahrenheit and creates ethylene. That's the basic building block of most plastics. Add pressure and a catalyst, and you get polyethylene or PET. We know PET from water bottles. That is extruded and cut into little pellets. And these tiny polyethylene pellets are the feedstock for everything from auto parts to zippers, but especially SUPs. It takes 1,000 pellets to make 1 disposable water bottle that will be used for a few minutes before being discarded. Okay, that was depressing. So now we know the problem with how it's made, but why is it so hard to recycle? Why can't we just recycle it all? Let's take the example of a water bottle. On the left, the chasing arrows on the bottom of the bottle is a number 1 or PET or polyethylene. That is also the case for the clamshells on the right. But the bottles are recyclable and the clamshells are not. So why is that? One reason is that manufacturers use different processes to produce different kinds of PET containers. They make clamshells using a process called thermoforming, and bottles and jugs through a process called blow molding. That makes them just different enough so that the clamshells cannot be included with the plastic slurry that will be created from the bottles. Another problem with PET is that the optic sorters at the sorting facilities cannot recognize the clamshell shape. They're set to shape and not resin. So they will capture the bottles and not the clamshells. And lastly, when people wish cycle, or I wish it was recyclable and I'm going to put the wrong thing in the bin, that thing takes a long journey to a sorting facility called a MRF, where it goes through miles of conveyor belts and ends up in the last pile headed for the nearby landfill, wasting everybody's time, energy, and money. Single stream material recovery facilities, or MRFs, are where almost all U.S. recyclables end up. These are sorting facilities. Nothing gets recycled there. As you can see, everything rolls down a conveyor belt in a single stream to be sorted, mostly mechanically. Magnets catch the metals, eddy currents blow aluminum off the belt, optic sorters and robots separate out the few plastics that actually get recycled. Numbers, ones, twos, and sometimes fives. Then the sorted materials are baled and sold to waste brokers. Due to the low value of post-consumer plastics, a waste broker may be an incinerator plant where it's basically burned and used for fuel. And since an estimated 45% of plastic produced today goes strictly to making SUPs and packaging, we should just call it frackaging. At this point, so much plastic's being made that if plastic were a country, it'd be the world's 5th largest emitter of greenhouse gases, making it a huge contributor to climate change. So, once I found out all these details about how damaging SUPs are throughout their life cycle, from extraction to manufacturing, brief life of a few minutes or less to disposal, I felt pretty angry and dismayed. What could I do? Well, of course, we can do our best in our home, school, and work to minimize our use of SUPs. But our making personal choices to avoid SUPs by itself cannot change a crisis this big. It's harder and harder to even feed ourselves without unwittingly buying stuff in SUPs. The real solution is to turn off the tap. We must stop making SUPs and stop using them. We need to switch to reusables and refillables. Groups like Upstream are working on infrastructure for us to be able to do that. So let's take a 3-prong approach. Number 1, now that you know about this, each one needs to teach one. We must educate our communities through presentations like this one, speaking and tabling at community events and schools, just to name a few. 2, we need to put pressure on the companies that create and purchase SUPs. What if those plastic producers and buyers of plastic packaging had to deal with the disposing of it? Let's tell them, you made it, you take it. And that brings us to 3, which is to support legislation where you can. Extended producer responsibility, or EPR bills, have been introduced and or passed in almost a dozen states, including Colorado. And you are never too young or too old to write or call your legislators and ask for EPR. Are you in? These groups are all working on different aspects of SUP's pollution crisis. Join them. Join us. Thank you.